Hey guys, tonight we are going to travel back to a time and place that was simultaneously the most advanced and one of the most fragrant places on Earth. We're heading to Victorian London, right on the cusp of the infamous summer of 1858, an event so overwhelmingly stinky it was literally called the Great Stink. Honestly, just breathing the air of the city on a good day was a challenge, so if we were really there, your 21st century lungs might just give up. Good thing this is all in our imagination. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It helps the channel find other people who, like us, enjoy falling asleep to tales of historical filth. Then while you're at it, let me know in the comments what city you're listening from, and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see where everyone is tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you notice isn't a sight, but a sound and a feeling. It's the rhythmic, heavy clatter of the train on the tracks, a sound that has defined this new age of steam and iron. As you pull into the station, a vast, smoky cathedral of glass and steel, the air changes. It grows thick, heavy with the taste of coal, smoke, and dampness. You step out onto the platform, and for a moment, you're just a tiny figure in a swirling ocean of humanity. Men in top hats, women with impossibly wide skirts, porters shouting as they haul mountains of luggage, 100 different conversations happening all at once. Welcome to London, Yoba, the biggest, richest, and most powerful city on the planet. You secure a cab, a rickety wooden box pulled by a horse that looks as tired as you feel. As it clatters out onto the cobblestone streets, the scale of the city truly hits you. It's endless, a sprawling, chaotic forest of brick and stone, stretching as far as you can see in every direction. The buildings, whether grand townhouses or humble shops, are all painted with the same brush of grey and black soot. A fine layer of grime covers everything, including, you quickly notice, the color of your own shirt. The sky above isn't blue. It's a permanent, hazy lid of brownish grey, a mixture of fog from the nearby river and the smoke belching from tens of thousands of chimneys. They call the really thick fog a pea souper, and you can see why. It's a fog you can almost chew. The air itself is a strange cocktail of smells. There's the ever-present coal smoke, of course, but mixed with it is the warm, earthy scent of countless horses. This brings you to a rather pressing and frankly unavoidable feature of the London streetscape. Horse manure, with tens of thousands of horses serving as the city's engines. They produce an astonishing amount of waste every single day. Navigating a street crossing is less a walk and more a strategic dance. Hopping over puddles of questionable origin and dodging piles of dung. Some forward-thinking folks at the time were genuinely worried that the city would eventually be buried under 9 feet of manure. A weirdly specific, but not entirely baseless fear. This is the heart of the British Empire, a place of incredible innovation and wealth. You see it in the Grand Banks, the bustling shops filled with goods from every corner of the globe. The sheer energy of the crowds, but it's a city of brutal contrasts. For every grand facade, there are a dozen hidden alleyways crammed with people living in conditions you can barely imagine. This city is a living, breathing organism, and like any organism, it produces waste, an incredible amount of it. You're just beginning to sense the scale of the problem. As your cab rattles on, you catch a glimpse of a wide, grey expanse of water between the buildings. That's the River Thames, the ancient artery of this great city. From here, it looks fine, a bit grey, perhaps, but it's a river in a city. What do you expect? You have no idea yet why it's really flowing in that water. As you settle in for the night, the sounds of the city seep through your window. The distant rumble of a train, the clip-clap of a lone horse, the faint chime of a clock tower. You wipe a grimy film from your brow and wonder about that famous London fog. Is it really just natural mist rolling in from the coast? Or is it something else entirely? Historians, still debate this. They argue over how much of the iconic peace super was natural sea fog, trapped by the city's geography, and how much was a purely man-made monster. A thick blanket woven from millions of domestic and industrial coal fires. Lying there, listening to the city's restless hum, you suspect the truth is a messy combination of both. The next morning, you're drawn by an invisible current, a desire to see the city's famous heart. You join the river of people flowing through the streets, all heading in the same general direction, and soon you find yourself standing before it. The River Thames. It's not just a river, it's a superhighway. The sheer scale of activity is breathtaking. You're looking at the busiest port in the world, and it shows. A dense forest of masts, undrigging from sailing ships, stretches in either direction, so thick that it almost blocks the view of the far bank. These are the magnificent clipper ships, sleek and fast, that have just returned from China or India. Their holds packed with tea, silks, and spices. Their journey has taken months, and their arrival is a spectacle. Closer to the shore, a swarm of smaller, grub-beer boats buzzes around the larger vessels. These are the lighters, essentially floating wagons, whose job is to ferry cargo from the deep water ships to the labyrinth of warehouses that line the riverbank. Men with soot-stained faces and impossibly broad shoulders shout and heave, maneuvering their clumsy barges with long poles, and weaving through them all are the newer, uglier, but far more efficient steamships. They chug along with an air of mechanical arrogance, belching black smoke that adds to the city's permanent gray haze. The air here is different from the rest of the city. The smell of coal is still present, but it's mixed with the scent of tar, damp rope, and exotic spices spilling from the warehouses. It's the smell of global commerce, the perfume of an empire. You lean against a stone parapet, watching the chaos. The water itself is a murky, opaque brown. It moves sluggishly, not with the brisk flow you'd expect from a river, but with a thick, syrupy laziness. Things float by, bits of wood, discarded crates, unidentifiable vegetable matter. You see children angling fishing lines into the soupy mixture and shudder to think what they could possibly catch. Further downriver, you spot the intake pipes of one of the city's many private water companies, sucking this very water up to be pumped, with minimal filtration, into the homes of unsuspecting Londoners. For now, it's just a curious observation. The danger hasn't quite registered. As you wander along the bank, you hear people talking excitedly about one of London's newest and strangest wonders, the Thames Tunnel, completed just 15 years earlier. It was the first tunnel ever to be built underneath a navigable river, an engineering marvel. For sure, your curiosity piqued. You pay your penny toll and descend the grand, sweeping staircase deep into the earth. The air grows cool and damp. At the bottom, a long, twin-arched hallway stretches out before you, lit by the flickering glow of gas lamps. It feels like you've walked into a subterranean cathedral. People stroll casually from one side of the river to the other, a journey that would have required a long, traffic-clogged detour over a bridge just a few years ago. It became a bizarre sort of tourist attraction. There are little stalls set up in the arches, selling souvenirs, snacks, and trinkets. You're literally shopping in a damp, echoing arcade at the bottom of a river. The absurdity of it is peak Victorian genius. Emerging on the south bank, blinking in the daylight, you look back at the river with a new sense of respect for the ingenuity it has inspired. Yet, as you watch the river traffic, you can't help but notice the casual way people interact with the water. Laundry is being washed at its edges. Boys are splashing each other, and ferrymen dip their oars without a second thought. And this is a point that historians still argue about. How much did the average Londoner of 1858 truly grasp the danger flowing past them? Was it a conscious denial, a case of out of sight, out of mind, or was it a simple lack of understanding, an acceptance that this was just how a great city's river was supposed to look and smell? There was no concept of germ theory yet, so the link between dirty water and deadly disease wasn't obvious. To them, this wasn't poison, It was just the river. For now, you share their blissful ignorance. Caught up in the spectacle and the energy of it all, you turn your back on the river, drawn once more into the city's intricate web of streets. If the Thames was the city's artery, then these narrow, winding lanes are its capillaries. The buildings lean in towards each other, blotting out what little sunlight penetrates the smoky haze, casting the streets in a perpetual twilight. The sheer noise is a physical force. It's a relentless, grinding symphony of iron-shod cartwheels clashing against uneven cobblestones. A sound so loud, you can feel it vibrating in your teeth. Above this din, you hear the shouts of vendors hawking their wares, everything from hot pies to live eels, and the constant, indiscriminate murmur of a million lives being lived on top of one another. It's here, in the thick of it, that you truly begin to understand the city's olfactory landscape. It's not one single smell, but a complex, layered tapestry of them, shifting with every corner you turn. The foundational note, of course, is the ever-present duo of horse and coal. But now you can parse the finer details. You pass a brewery, and a warm, slightly sweet smell of molten hops hangs heavy in the air. A few streets over, that pleasant aroma is violently elbowed aside by the acrid, chemical stench of a tannery, where hides are being cured in vats of foul-smelling liquids. It's a smell that catches in the back of your throat and makes you want to gag. And then there's the garbage. In an age before municipal trash collection as we know it, household waste, or dust, as it was quaintly called, was a constant problem. You see it piled in alleyways and gutters, heaps of ash from fireplaces, rotting vegetable peels, oyster shells, old rags, bones from last night's supper. These small mounds are just the tributaries flowing into vast, metropolitan mountains of refuse known as dust heaps, which sometimes grew to be several stories high on the outskirts of the city. Bizarrely, these weren't just dumps, they were valuable, privately owned hills of treasure. The ashen cinders were used for making bricks. The bits of metal were melted down, and the decomposed organic matter was sold as fertilizer. It was the ultimate, albeit disgusting, recycling program. As you navigate the treacherous sidewalks, you become acutely aware of the ground beneath your feet. The streets are slick with a thin, black mud of uncertain composition. You learn to give puddles a wide berth at a particularly busy intersection. The road is a sea of mud and horse droppings. Here you encounter a new profession, born of pure necessity. The crossing sweeper, the small boy, no older than 10, armed with a worn-out broom, dashes into the street between passing carts. He frantically sweeps a narrow path clear through the muck for well-dressed pedestrians. He holds out a grimy hand, and you, like the others, drop a half-penny in it for the service. It's a tiny, desperate transaction that perfectly captures the city's blend of squalor and enterprise. This is the air that everyone is breathing, every single day, and the prevailing medical theory of the time, the miasma theory, held that disease was spread by these foul smells, by this bad air. It seemed perfectly logical. The poorest, smelly street parts of the city were also the sickest. Therefore, the smell itself must be the carrier of illness, the physical manifestation of plague and fever. People would carry vials of smelling salts or perfumed handkerchiefs, not just to make the journey more pleasant, but in a genuine belief that it offered a shield against sickness. They didn't understand the microscopic world of germs. They could only fight what they could see, hear, and, most importantly, smell. Historians today still discuss the psychological impact of this sensory assault. Did living in such an environment breed a certain level of resignation, a callousness towards filth and discomfort, or did it create a constant, low-level anxiety, a feeling that you were perpetually under siege from an invisible, foul-smelling enemy? It's impossible to know for sure, but as you walk these streets, dodging the mud, the crowds, and the ever-changing clouds of odor, you feel a sense of being worn down. The energy of London is intoxicating, but its filth is exhausting. You start too long for a quiet room, a closed window, a single breath of clean air. But you're about to find out that even in your own private space, The city has a way of seeping in. After a long day navigating the city's chaotic streets, you finally arrive at your lodgings. It's not in one of the grand squares of the West End, but in a more typical London neighborhood. It's a narrow terraced house of dark brick, indistinguishable from the dozens of others pressed up against it on the street. The landlady, a woman with a permanently worried expression, shows you to your room on an upper floor. The staircase is steep and narrow, the air inside almost as thick and stuffy as it was outside, but with a new, more domestic blend of smells. Boiled cabbage, damp wool, and the faint, greasy scent of gas lighting. Your room is small, very small. There's a bed, a small washed stand with a pitcher and bowl, a single wooden chair, and a fireplace that looks like it hasn't been swept in a year. A single window looks out not onto a pleasant garden, but onto a tiny, dark air shaft, or perhaps the brick wall of the building next door, just a few feet away. This is luxury for many. You're lucky to have a room to yourself in the warrens of the city's poorer districts, like the infamous rookeries of Street Giles or the East End. A single room like this might be home to an entire family, or even multiple families, with nothing more than a chalk line on the floor to mark out their territory. You go to the washed stand to freshen up. The pitcher is filled with water, but as you pour it into the bowl, you notice it's slightly cloudy, with a faint yellowish tinge. This is the water supplied by one of the private water companies, pumped directly from the Thames. Your landlady assures you it's perfectly fine, but you recall the sluggish, brown river you saw earlier and decide to use it only for washing your hands. The thought of drinking it makes your stomach turn. Many Londoners, especially the poor, had no other choice. This was their drinking water, their cooking water, their everything water. As dusk falls, the landlady comes by to light the gas lamp in your room. With a hiss and a soft pop, a flickering, fish-tailed flame springs to life, casting dancing shadows on the walls. It's a modern marvel. This light on tap, far brighter and more convenient than candles or oil lamps, but it comes with a cost. The open flame consumes the already limited oxygen in the small, poorly ventilated room and releases its own cocktail of chemical byproducts. You can feel the air growing warmer and staler. You try to open the window, but it's been painted shut years ago. Even if you could open it, you'd only be letting in more of the city's smoky, foul air. You also notice a distinct lack of something you take for granted. A bathroom. There's no toilet, no sink with running water. When you ask the landlady, she points you towards a small, dark closet at the end of the hallway. Inside is a simple wooden box with a hole in it, a chamber pot tucked underneath. This is to be used, then carry down several flights of stairs, out the back door, and emptied into the privy in the tiny backyard. A small, rickety shed built over a brick-lined pit in the ground. This pit is the cesspool. It's the final destination for all the household's waste. It's a system that has been in use for centuries, but the sheer density of London's population is pushing this ancient system to its absolute breaking point. One of the more peculiar, and frankly grim, details of life in these crowded tenements was the death club. Because funerals were so expensive, many poor families joined societies where they'd pay a small weekly fee. In return, the club would guarantee a respectable burial when a family member, often a child, passed away. It was a form of life insurance where the payout was a proper funeral. Historians still debate the social implications of this. Was it a beautiful example of communal support in the face of hardship, or a grim reflection of just how common death was, that it needed to be budgeted for like groceries? Lying in your small, stuffy room, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the house settling around you, you are starkly aware of your own vulnerability. The grand, powerful London you saw on the streets feels a world away. Here, in the quiet intimacy of your rented room, you feel the city's true, precarious nature. You're just another body in a vast, overcrowded hive, breathing the same stale air, dependent on the same cloudy water, and hoping for the best. The next day, you're invited to visit the home of a slightly more prosperous acquaintance, a mid-level clerk who lives in one of the newer, more fashionable suburban developments. His house is a proud brick villa, and HES eager to show off his family's latest and most prized possession, a brand new indoor water closet. You follow him up the stairs to a small room dedicated entirely to this marvel of modern sanitation. It's a beautiful piece of ceramic artistry, decorated with intricate blue floral patterns. A polished wooden seat and a high cistern with a long chain complete the picture. This, he explains, is the pinnacle of civilized living. No more nighttime trips to a freezing privy in the backyard. No more foul-smelling cesspools just a few feet from the kitchen. With a proud flourish, he pulls the chain. There's a satisfying rush of water from the high tank, a swirl in the bowl, and just like that, everything disappears. It's clean, it's efficient, it's almost magical. He beams, explaining how this invention is transforming domestic life, bringing a new level of hygiene and convenience to the modern home. You have to admit, it's impressive, a vast improvement over the primitive arrangements in your own lodging. But then you ask the crucial question, where does it all go? He gestures vaguely towards the window, to the sewer. Of course, it's all taken care of. This is where the grand, unintended catastrophe begins. The invention of the flush toilet, patented by Alexander, coming back in 1775 and perfected by inventors like Joseph Bromley and George Jennings, was hailed as a public health triumph. And for the individual household, it removed human waste from the immediate vicinity of the home, breaking the direct link between a family and their own refuse. The problem was, the sewer it was being connected to wasn't a sophisticated, modern processing system. In most cases, it was simply the nearest storm drain, originally built just to carry rainwater off the streets. These drains, in turn, all lead to one place, the nearest stream or river, and in London, all streams and rivers ultimately flowed into the Thames. So, every pull of that proud homeowner's chain was sending waste directly into the city's main water source. It was a classic case of solving one problem by creating a much bigger one elsewhere. As more and more middle-class homes adopted this new technology, the volume of raw, untreated sewage pouring into the river grew exponentially. The old system of cesspools, for all its flaws, at least contained the waste in a semi-solid state. Where it decomposed slowly, the flush toilet liquefied it, making it mobile, and sent it on a one-way trip to the Thames. The weird and slightly stomach-churning side effect of this new plumbing was the rise of the flushermen. These were men employed by the sewer commissions to walk through the larger sewer pipes, breaking up blockages to keep things flowing. It was an incredibly dangerous job. They worked in near total darkness, wading through rivers of filth, constantly at risk from collapsing brickwork, pockets of poisonous gas, and sudden flash floods caused by heavy rain or, bizarrely, high tides. The Thames was tidal, and a high tide could push water back up the sewer outlets, trapping anyone working inside. This mass adoption of the flush toilet is a subject of great interest for historians, who debate its role as the primary trigger for the Great Stink. Was it truly the flush toilet's fault, or was it just one factor among many? Some argue that the city's population growth was so extreme that the old cesspool system was doomed to fail anyway, and the river would have become overwhelmed regardless. Others maintain that the widespread installation of water closets in the 1840s and 50s was the specific action that tipped the scales, turning the Thames from a merely dirty river into a flowing sewer. As you stand there, admiring the pretty floral patterns on the ceramic bowl, you can't help but see it as a beautiful, deadly Trojan horse, the symbol of progress that, ironically, was about to poison the very city it was meant to be civilizing. Each flush was another drop in a bucket that was about to overflow in the most spectacular and foul-smelling way imaginable. Before you leave the clerk's house, feeling a little queasy about his modern plumbing, you can't help but think about the system it replaced, the cesspool. It sounds ancient and primitive, and it was, but it was also a complex, hidden world just beneath the city's surface. you start to imagine what lies under the floorboards and behind the walls of a typical London house. Not just your lodging, but thousands like it. You're picturing a brick-lined pit, essentially a well dug into the ground, but for collecting waste instead of water. For centuries, this was the default solution. Every house had one, usually in the cellar or the small backyard. As London grew at a dizzying pace, so did the number of these pits. The city's ground became a honeycomb of them. In many areas, they were dug so close together that the porous brickwork would fail, and the contents of one cesspool would slowly leach into its neighbor, or worse, into the soil and the groundwater. This led to a rather unpleasant phenomenon in older houses, especially those with basements. The walls would become saturated with filth from nearby pits, creating a permanent, damp, foul-smelling environment. People would complain of miasma rising from their cellars, and they weren't wrong, though they misunderstood its true danger. The law, in its infinite wisdom, mandated that cesspools had to be a certain distance from freshwater wells, but in a city this crowded, that was often impossible. The ground beneath London was becoming a toxic sponge. Imagine digging a new well for drinking water, only to find you've tapped into a source that's been mingling with your neighbor's cesspool for the last 50 years. This contamination was happening silently, invisibly, beneath everyone's feet. Cleaning these pits was a major and disgusting undertaking. It wasn't something a homeowner could do themselves. It required a specialist. When a cesspool was full, a state of affairs usually announced by an overflowing privy or an unbearable smell. The landlord would have to hire a team to empty it. This process was so disruptive and so foul that it was legally required to be done only at night. This brings you to one of the strangest and most forgotten aspects of Victorian urban life, the legal battles over ancient lights. In a city where buildings were crammed together, access to sunlight and air was a precious commodity. The doctrine of ancient lights stated that if a window had received uninterrupted daylight for 20 years, it gained a legal right to that light forever. A neighbor couldn't just build a new wall and block it. This led to all sorts of bizarre architectural solutions, like buildings with strange angles and light wells, all designed to avoid infringing on a neighbor's ancient lights. It's a fascinating detail that shows how every aspect of life, even the path of a sunbeam, was subject to the intense pressures of urban density. Back in the world of cesspools, the sheer number of them was staggering. By the mid-19th century, it was estimated there were over 200 cesspools in London. The system was at its breaking point. Many landlords, to save money on expensive cleanings, would secretly and illegally build overflows that drained directly into the nearest sewer or ditch. It was a ticking time bomb. This is a point that historians who study urban infrastructure love to debate. Was the Great Stink an inevitable result of a fundamentally flawed sanitation philosophy? Or was it more a failure of regulation and enforcement, where thousands of individuals cutting corners collectively created a city-wide disaster? The evidence suggests a bit of both. The cesspool system might have worked for a medieval town, but for a sprawling industrial metropolis of over 2 million people, it was a recipe for catastrophe. Standing on a London street, you realize you're walking on a thin crust of cobblestone and earth, and just beneath it lies a hidden, saturated underworld of human history in its most literal and processed form. The city wasn't just built on clay and gravel. It was built on its own accumulated filth. As you lie in your bed one night, unable to sleep due to the stuffy air and the unfamiliar city sounds, you're startled by a loud noise from the street below. It's a rumbling, clattering sound, followed by rough voices and the clang of metal on stone. You creak to your window and manage to pry it open just a crack, peering down into the gas-lit darkness. Below, a cart is drawn up in front of a neighboring house. Several men, their faces smudged with grime, are gathered around an open hole in the pavement you hadn't noticed before. They work with a grin, practiced efficiency, using buckets on long ropes to haul up a thick, dark sludge from the earth. The smell that wafts up, even to your high window, is breathtakingly foul. You've just met the night soil men. These men were the inheritors of one of London's oldest, most essential, and least respected professions. They were the ones who did the job. No one else would, emptying the city as overflowing cesspools. They were called nightmen or gong farmers in older times, from a medieval word for dung, and their work was strictly confined to the hours between midnight and 5 to minimize the olfactory offense to the general public. Their arrival in a street was an unmistakable event, announcing itself with a stench that could wake the soundest sleeper. You watch them work. It's brutal, physical labor. One man, the whole man, would be lowered into the cesspit itself, where he would stand, sometimes waist deep in filth, shoveling the semi-solid waste into buckets. The men above, the tubmen, would haul the buckets up and tip them into a large, sealed cart. They had to work quickly, not just because of the limited hours, but because of the very real danger of asphyxiation from the methane and hydrogen sulfide gases that accumulated in the unventilated pits. Many a nightman met his end at the bottom of a cesspool. Despite the grim nature of their work, it was a surprisingly organized and, at times, lucrative trade. The night soil they collected wasn't just waste. It was a valuable commodity. It was sold to farmers on the outskirts of London as a potent fertilizer, or guano. The price would vary depending on the quality, with the contents of cesspools from richer neighborhoods, whose residents had a better diet, fetching a higher price than that from the poor districts. It was a strange, odorous form of economic trickle-down. This leads you to a curious little detail of the trade. The scurf hunter, while the nightmen were focused on the bulk removal, there was often a woman or child who would follow them, whose job was to sift through the sludge for any lost treasures. Coins, buttons, spoons, even rings and small pieces of jewelry that had been accidentally dropped down the privy would be painstakingly recovered from the muck. It was a grimy treasure hunt at the bottom of the city's waste chain. The work of the nightmen is a source of ongoing discussion for social historians. Were these men seen as outcasts, pariahs performing a shameful task, or were they viewed as a sort of necessary evil, respected for doing a vital job? The answer seems to be complicated. They were certainly looked down upon for the nature of their work, but they were also skilled tradesmen who commanded a decent wage. They were a class unto themselves, living undoffed, unsocializing separately from the rest of society, bound together by the unique and pungent nature of their employment. As you watch the men finish their work, seal their cart, and rattle off down the street, the immediate, overpowering stench begins to fade, replaced by the city's usual background hum of smells. You close your window, but the image of the men working in the dark stays with you. They were the unsung, unseen custodians of London's old sanitary system, a system that was now being rendered obsolete by the very flushed toilets that were supposed to represent progress. With every new water closet installed, a nightman's livelihood became a little more precarious, and another stream of untreated waste was diverted from his cart into the long-suffering Thames. The city was trading one kind of problem for another, and the consequences were flowing, silently, unsteadily, towards the river. One afternoon, you find yourself wandering through a street market. The air is a riot of smells: freshly baked bread, wilting greens, the sharp tang of cheap gin from a nearby pub. But underneath it all, you sense a current of fear. People are talking in hushed, anxious tones. You catch a recurring phrase, a name spoken like a curse. The cholera. They also call it the Blue Death. You learn this is because the disease dehydrates its victims so rapidly that their skin takes on a grayish-blue tint, their features shrinking, unsharpening. It's a terrifyingly swift illness. A man could be healthy and hearty at breakfast and be dead by supper time. This isn't a new fear. London has suffered through devastating cholera outbreaks before. Most recently, just a few years ago in 1854. But like a recurring nightmare, the threat never truly goes away. And everyone, from the most esteemed physician in a fine West End practice to the common laborer on the docks, believes they know the enemy. It is the miasma, the bad air, the foul stench rising from the city's filth. They believe the disease is a poisonous vapor, an invisible cloud that drifts through the streets, seeping into homes and claiming its victims. It makes a grim kind of sense. The poorest, most crowded, and smelly street parts of town always suffer the most. Therefore, the smell itself must be the carrier of the pestilence. To combat this airborne enemy, the city engages in a desperate, almost ritualistic, form of atmospheric warfare. During an outbreak, you'll see barrels of tar and pitch set alight on street corners, sending thick, acrid plumes of black smoke into the air. The idea is to fight a bad smell with a stronger, supposedly purifying one. People walk around clutching handkerchiefs doused in vinegar or carrying small, perforated boxes called vinaigrette filled with scented sponges. The wealthy might retreat to the countryside to escape the city's corrupted air. The poor have no choice but to stay, breathing in the smoke and the fear, and praying the miasma passes their door by. You see public health notices posted on walls, issued by the General Board of Health. They give advice to the citizenry. Keep your homes well ventilated, whitewash your walls, and above all, eliminate any foul odors. They recommend sprinkling chloride of lime, a potent disinfectant, in privies and drains. The focus is entirely on cleaning the air, on battling the stench. The recommendations are born of a genuine desire to save lives, but they are aimed at the wrong enemy. They are, in essence, trying to shoot a ghost. And here you stumble upon a fascinating, and at the time, deeply unpopular, counter-argument. A small, fringe group of thinkers are beginning to question the whole miasma theory. They are pointing to strange anomalies in the data. Why does a cholera outbreak sometimes leapfrog over a whole neighborhood, only to reappear miles away? If it were in the air, wouldn't it spread more evenly? These questions are mostly dismissed as the ravings of cranks. The medical establishment is powerful and unified in its belief in miasma. To challenge it is to challenge common sense itself. This debate over the transmission of cholera is one of the most significant medical arguments of the 19th century. Historians today still analyze the social and institutional inertia that kept the miasma theory alive for so long, even as evidence mounted against it. It was a comfortable theory. It blamed the victims' unclean living conditions rather than the profitable water companies or the negligent city authorities. As you walk the streets, this new knowledge changes everything. The smells of the city are no longer just unpleasant. They are menacing. The damp mist rolling off the river doesn't just feel chilly. It feels like a potential shroud. You look at your fellow Londoners, at the determined set of their jaws as they hurry through the streets, and you see the strain of living with this constant, invisible threat. You start to understand that the grand industrial confidence of this city is built on a very fragile foundation. It's a city haunted by the ghost of a disease it completely misunderstands. You find yourself looking at the cloudy water in your washing bowl with a new suspicion. Perhaps the enemy isn't in the air at all. Perhaps it's in the water. Your curiosity, now tinged with a growing sense of dread, pulls you back to the banks of the Thames. This time, you don't just see the bustling commerce. You start to see the river for what it has truly become. London's great, open sewer. You find a spot near one of the city's many bridges and just watch. The evidence is right there, flowing in plain sight, for anyone who cares to look. From the mouths of countless small pipes and larger arched tunnels set into the riverbanks, a constant, murky stream of waste pours into the river. These are the outlets of the city's sewers, a network originally designed for rainwater that is now hopelessly burdened with the effluent from hundreds of thousands of homes and businesses. You watch as a slick of greasy, iridescent scum floats by, the runoff from a nearby gasworks. A little later, a cloud of dark red colors the water as it passes the outlet from a slaughterhouse district. The animal blood and offal is just sluiced directly into the nearest drain. You see the refuse from tanneries, breweries, dye works, a chemical cocktail of industrial London, all mingling with the domestic waste from a population of more than 2 million people. The river is no longer just brown. It's a shifting palette of gray, green, black, and red, bubbling with gases from the decomposing matter below. You learn about the river's morbid ecosystem. In the past, the Thames had been famous for its salmon. Now, The only living things that seem to thrive in its toxic brew are eels and a particularly hardy type of flounder. Fishermen who catch them say they taste of copper and sewage. Even the birds seem to be affected. Gulls circle overhead, but they seem hesitant to dive into the foul water. The river has become so de-exigmenting from the sheer volume of decomposing waste that it can no longer support most forms of aquatic life. It is, in effect, biologically dead. This leads you to a grimly fascinating and slightly unbelievable bit of information. In the early 1852s, the great scientist Michael Faraday, one of the most respected minds in Britain, took a boat trip on the Thames. He was so horrified by the state of the river that he conducted a little experiment. He dropped pieces of white card into the water to see how far they would sink before disappearing from view. He reported, in a scathing letter to the Times newspaper, that the cards vanished from sight within an inch of the surface. The water was so thick with effervescent matter, as he politely put it, that it was practically opaque. His letter caused a brief public outcry, but nothing was done. The problem was just too big, too expensive to fix. You walk along the southern bank, through areas like Lambeth and Southwark. Here, the situation is even more dire. This side of the river is lower lying, and the residents are generally poor. Their water is supplied by companies that draw their intake from the most polluted stretches of the Thames, downstream from the main sewer outlets. You see people lowering buckets on ropes from their riverside houses directly into the river to get water for washing or cleaning. The connection between the sewage outlet you just saw and the water in that woman's bucket is terrifyingly direct. Historians still debate the extent to which the general public was aware of this direct contamination. Did people genuinely not make the connection? Or was it a form of willful blindness born of desperation? For many, there was simply no alternative. This was the only water available. To question its quality would be to admit a terrifying, paralyzing truth about the world they lived in. It was easier, perhaps, to blame the bad air than to confront the fact that the very water they drank was a diluted poison. Looking at the river now, you finally understand. The Thames isn't just a backdrop to London life. It's an active participant. It's the city's garbage disposal, its toilet, and its drinking fountain, all at once. The various smells you encountered across the city, the industrial, the domestic, the commercial, they all end up here. This is their final meeting place. A great, slow-moving conference of filth. You realize that the cholera, the Blue Death, doesn't need to be a ghost in the air. It has a physical chariot, a superhighway of contamination, flowing right through the heart of the empire. And the summer is just beginning. The weather is getting warmer. You have a sickening feeling that things are about to get much, much worse. In your wanderings through the city, listening to the anxious chatter about cholera and miasma, you start to hear whispers of a different story. It's a story about a doctor, a man named John Snow, who has a radical, and too many, a ridiculous idea. He doesn't believe the disease is in the air. He believes it's in the water. A few years earlier, during the terrible 1854 outbreak, he conducted a now famous investigation in the Soho district that is still talked about, mostly as a curious piece of medical eccentricity. You seek out the area, a dense, bustling neighborhood packed with homes, workshops, and pubs. As you walk the streets, you try to imagine the scene Snow encountered. Panic, death, and confusion. But instead of just wringing his hands and blaming the smells, Snow did something unheard of. He started to talk to the victims' families. He went door to door, asking a simple question: where do you get your water? He wasn't a public health official. He was an anesthetist, a respected physician known for administering chloroform to Queen Victoria during childbirth. This was a personal crusade. Driven by scientific curiosity, he began to mark his findings on a map of the neighborhood. For every reported cholera death, he drew a small black bar at the address. As his map grew, a terrifying pattern began to emerge. The black bars, the deaths, were clustered. They weren't spread evenly, as you'd expect from an airborne miasma. Instead, they radiated out from a single point on Broad Street, now Broadwick Street. And what was at that point a public water pump? The Broad Street pump was popular. It had a reputation for having colder, better tasting water than the other local pumps. People would walk several blocks just to fill their jugs there. Snow's investigation uncovered story after story that supported his theory. There was a local workhouse that had its own well and suffered almost no deaths, even though it was surrounded by infected houses. There was a brewery where the workers were all given a daily ration of beer and never drank water from the pump. None of them got sick. His most compelling piece of evidence, the one that people still talk about, was the case of the widow who had moved away from Soho to the leafy suburb of Hampstead. She had died of cholera, and so had her niece. This was a puzzle. How could the Soho miasma have reached them miles away? Snow, ever the detective, discovered that the widow had been so fond of the water from the Broad Street pump that she had a large bottle of it brought to her by cart every single day. The poison had been delivered to her door. Armed with this overwhelming date, the driven evidence, Snow went before the local board of guardians. He presented his mouth, his interviews, his inescapable conclusion. They were skeptical. The miasma theory was too deeply entrenched. But Snow's evidence was so compelling, and the situation so desperate, that they agreed to a compromise. They wouldn't endorse his wild theory, but they would take the handle off the pump. It was a simple, pragmatic act. The handle was removed, and the outbreak in Soho, which had already been waning, came to a halt. It should have been a triumph, a vindication of the scientific method, but the medical establishment remained unconvinced. They argued the outbreak was already fading anyway. They pointed out that Snow couldn't actually prove what was in the water. He had no germ theory to back him up. Louis Pasteur's work was still years away. Snow could only describe it as some invisible morbid matter. Aba's art detail that underscores the resistance he faced is that a later investigation discovered the source of the contamination. A leaking cesspool just 3 feet from the pump's well, which contained the waste from a baby who had died of cholera at the very start of the outbreak. Yet, even with this smoking gun, the official report concluded that Snow's theory was not proven. Historians are still fascinated by the story of John Snow. They debate whether he should be seen as a lone genius fighting against a blind establishment, or as one voice among a growing number of contagionists who were challenging the old miasma paradigm. What's certain is that his work was a landmark moment in the history of epidemiology and public health. Standing on a street corner in Soho, you can almost feel the ghost of his methodical investigation. He gave the city a vital clue, a roadmap to the real killer, but it was a clue the city, as a whole, was not yet ready to accept. They had taken the handle off one pump, but thousands of other taps were still delivering water straight from the foul, contaminated Thames. The days grow longer. The mildness of spring gives way to the oppressive heat of a true London summer. By mid-June of 1858, the city is caught in the grip of a relentless heat wave. The sun, which for most of the year is a pale, distant disk filtered through a scrim of smoke and fog, now beats down with an almost tropical intensity. The air, usually damp and cool, becomes hot, stagnant, and heavy. It feels like you're breathing through a warm, wet blanket. The heat transforms the city. The dark brick buildings, which normally feel damp and chilly, now radiate warmth, turning the narrow streets into suffocating canyons. The ever-present smell of coal smoke seems to hang lower, trapping the heat and other odors at street level. People's temperaments begin to fray. The usual hustle and bustle of the streets slows to a more languid, irritable pace. Those who can afford it flee the city for seaside resorts like Brighton or Margate, leaving the city to swelter. For the millions who remained, there is no escape. Your small, stuffy room becomes an oven. Sleep is fitful, punctuated by the drone of flies in the distant, restless sounds of the city. You find yourself, like many Londoners, drawn to the river. In a normal summer, the Thames would offer a hint of relief, a cool breeze off the water. But this is not a normal summer. As you approach the river, you notice something is wrong. The smell is different. The usual faint, brackish odor of the river has been replaced by something far more potent, something actively, aggressively foul. The heat is acting like a giant incubator. The Thames, already saturated with an unprecedented volume of sewage thanks to the proliferation of flushed toilets, is now being slowly cooked. The warm, shallow water and the bright sun are accelerating the decomposition of the organic matter languishing in the riverbed. The process of putrefaction goes into overdrive. You can see it happening. Great bubbles of methane and hydrogen sulfide gas erupt from the depths, bursting on the surface with a foul hiss, releasing their noxious contents into the hot summer air. The river's appearance has changed, too. The water level is unusually low due to the lack of rain, concentrating the filth. The sluggish current barely moves. The water is no longer just a murky brown. It has taken on a sinister, greenish-black hue, and its consistency seems thicker, more like a thin porridge than water. Along the banks, where the tide has receded, it leaves behind a glistening, black, foul-smelling ooze that bakes and crusts in the sun. The sight is both grotesque and mesmerizing. One of the peculiar phenomena of this period was the booming trade in ice. Not the clean, manufactured ice we know today, but ice harvested during the winter from ponds and canals on the outskirts of the city. It was stored in deep, insulated ice wells. The wealthy would buy blocks of it to chill their drinks and make ice cream. However, the purity of this ice was highly questionable, often harvested from water sources that were themselves contaminated. It was another little Trojan horse of potential illness, delivered to the homes of the rich as the heat wave intensifies through June. The problem grows from a localized nuisance along the riverbanks into a city-wide crisis. The smell, a gag-inducing blend of raw sewage and industrial chemicals, begins to permeate everything. It's no longer just a bad smell. It's a physical presence. It clings to your clothes, your hair, your food. It seeps through closed windows and shuttered doors. There is no escaping it. This, you realize, is the beginning of something new. The city has endured foul smells for centuries, but this is different. This is an atmospheric event. Historians and climate scientists still discuss the specific meteorological conditions of that summer. Was it simply a random, unusually intense heatwave, or was it part of a larger climatic pattern? Some research suggests that the summer of 1858 was one of the hottest and driest on record for the region. It was a perfect storm of circumstances, a river already at its breaking point, a city with a flawed understanding of disease. And now, the relentless, suffocating heat, the fuse has been lit. The great, stinking bomb that London has been building for decades is about to detonate. You can feel the tension in the hot, still air. Something has to give. It happens in late June. The lingering, unpleasant smell you've become accustomed to suddenly escalates. It's no longer a background nuisance. It's an invasion. This is the moment history will remember as the beginning of the Great Stink. The smell that rises from the cooked, fermented river is a force of nature. It's a complex, multi-layered horror. There's the base note of pure, raw sewage, a smell of human waste on an industrial scale. Layered on top of that is the sharp, rotten egg stench of hydrogen sulfide, a gas so potent it can tarnish silver and blacken lead-based paint on riverside houses. Mixed in are the chemical undertones from the factories, the sour smell of decay, and something else, something uniquely foul that defies description. The stench rolls off the river in visible waves, a shimmering, hazy mist that you can almost see. It's a physical assault on the senses. Your eyes water, your throat constricts. You find yourself involuntarily gagging, a reflex you can't control. The taste of it coats your tongue. Londoners, the people hardened to urban smells, are completely overwhelmed. You see people walking hastily through the streets, holding handkerchiefs, cloths, even bundles of herbs to their faces. The sale of perfume, vinegar, and smelling salts skyrockets. But these are flimsy shields against such a potent olfactory onslaught. The smell doesn't stay by the river. It's a miasma, but not in the way they thought. It's not carrying cholera, but it is a pestilence of its own. It creeps, block by block, into the heart of the city. It invades homes, shops, and offices. Food tastes of it, clothes smell of it. The very air you breathe feels corrupted, tainted. Life in the city becomes a constant, losing battle against the encroaching stink. You witness the river traffic, the lifeblood of the city, grinding to a halt. The ferrymen who ply their trade across the Thames, men known for their stoicism, find their work unbearable. Passengers are scarce. No one wants to be on the water for a second longer than necessary. The captains of steamships complain that their crews are falling ill, not from cholera, but from nausea and headaches caused by the foul air. The busiest port in the world is being defeated by its own waste. A truly bizarre and frankly disgusting detail from this time is that the river's water had become so saturated with grease and organic matter that it was, in a strange way, flammable. There are anecdotal accounts of bubbles of methane on the surface of the river actually catching fire, creating small, flickering blue flames that would dance on the foul water. It's a hellish, almost biblical image, a river of filth that could literally be set ablaze. The situation becomes a topic of frantic discussion. You overhear conversations everywhere, in pubs, in queues, on street corners. Everyone has a theory. Some blame the newfangled flushed toilets. Others blame the factory owners. Many see it as a divine judgment, a punishment for the city's sins. The newspapers are filled with letters to the editor, each proposing a more desperate and outlandish solution than the last. One popular idea is to dump hundreds of thousands of tons of lime chloride into the river to disinfect it. Another suggests simply covering the entire river over. The prevailing miasma theory, for all its scientific flaws, now seems terrifyingly real. The air is bad. It's visibly, tangibly, suffocatingly bad. The fear of cholera, which had been a low-level hum of anxiety, now crescendos into a full-blown panic. If the disease is carried on the smell, and the smell is now everywhere, then surely a devastating plague is imminent. The city holds its breath, waiting for the Blue Death to strike. Historians still debate the true health impacts of the stink itself, separate from the waterborne diseases. While the miasma theory was wrong about cholera, breathing in concentrated hydrogen sulfide and other noxious gases for weeks on end certainly wasn't healthy. It caused headaches, nausea, and other ailments, creating a city that was not only panicked but also physically unwell. You stand on a bridge, looking down at the source of it all. The sun beats down on the syrupy, bubbling water. The smell is a physical weight. You feel trapped, besieged. The greatest city in the world, the heart of a global empire, is being held hostage by its own river. It has become a self-poisoning machine, and the stench is the scream of its malfunctioning engine. The situation is now more than a public nuisance. It's a national emergency, and the crisis is about to arrive at the very seat of power. The overwhelming stench, which has already conquered the homes and streets of ordinary Londoners, now advances on its most prestigious target, the Houses of Parliament. The magnificent neo-Gothic palace, a proud symbol of British democracy and power, sits directly on the north bank of the Thames. Its architects had intended the riverside location to be scenic and majestic. In the summer of 1858, it becomes the building's greatest vulnerability. The very terrace where politicians were meant to take the air becomes an uninhabitable, foul-smelling hillscape. You can imagine the scene inside the hallowed chambers. The lawmakers of the most powerful empire on earth are trying to debate the affairs of state, but they can't concentrate. The great stink is seeping in through every door, every window, every crack in the stone. It's a profoundly democratic smell. It makes no distinction between a poor labourer and a wealthy member of parliament. Inside the House of Commons, the atmosphere becomes unbearable. The grand debating chamber, designed for eloquent speeches and reasoned argument, is filled with the nauseating stench of the nation's sewage. In a desperate attempt to continue their work, the authorities resort to a solution that is both comical and pathetic. They order the building's curtains to be soaked in a solution of chloride of lime, a harsh, bleach-white-smelling disinfectant. The hope is that this will neutralize the foul miasma from the river. So, you have this absurd image, the mother of all parliaments, its grand windows draped in wet, chemical-soaked sheets, with the supposed aim of protecting the health and olfactory senses of its members. It doesn't work. The stench of the river simply mingles with the acrid smell of the chloride of lime, creating a new, even more disgusting perfume of bleach and sewage. The politicians are trapped. Benjamin Disraeli, a leading figure in the House and future Prime Minister, describes the river as a Stygian pool, reeking with ineffable and unbearable horrors. He and his fellow MPs are seen rushing from the Riverside Library, clutching handkerchiefs to their faces, their eyes streaming. The law courts in Westminster Hall are forced to abandon their sessions. The business of government itself is grinding to a halt. This leads to one of the most wonderfully bizarre tidbits of the whole affair. In a desperate attempt to find a solution, the MPs turn to the scientist Michael Faraday, the same man who had warned them about the state of the river years earlier. He is called to give evidence. One of the proposed solutions he is asked to evaluate is a truly wild idea: to install huge canvas sails over the sewer outlets at high tide, with the hope that this would somehow trap the bad smells. It's a perfect example of the pre-scientific desperation of the time, like trying to catch a smell with a butterfly net. The climax arrives in late June, on a particularly hot day. The stench in the House of Commons becomes so overpowering that a motion is brought forward to abandon Westminster altogether and reconvene in a different city, perhaps Oxford or St Albans. The idea of the British government being driven out of its own capital city by a bad smell is both a national humiliation and a terrifying prospect. The debate is frantic. One MP famously declared that the stench was so bad it was the only thing that could ever stop the endless talking of Parliament. Ultimately, they don't flee the city, but they do something almost as drastic. They vote to adjourn. Parliament is shut down. The government of the British Empire has been officially defeated by the Great Stink. Historians still marvel at this moment. Was it the turning point? Some argue that the crisis had been building for years, and action was inevitable. Others maintain that if the stink hadn't directly affected the politicians in their place of work, they would have continued to ignore the plight of ordinary Londoners indefinitely. The fact that their own comfort and ability to function were compromised was the catalyst that finally forced their hand. You can picture the scene. The politicians spilling out of the grand halls of Westminster, not in triumph, but in a hasty retreat, rooted by an enemy they couldn't see but could smell all too well. The government has fallen silent. The city is in a state of panic. The heat is relentless. The stink is all-powerful. London has reached its breaking point. The crisis has reached the very top. And now, finally, something will have to be done. With Parliament in disarray and the government effectively in retreat, the city is left to fend for itself. This strange, surreal atmosphere descends upon London. The Great Stink is no longer just a topic of conversation. It's the central, unavoidable fact of life. It dictates everything. The heat wave continues unabated, and with every passing day, the river seems to brew up a more potent version of its foul perfume. A sense of siege mentality takes hold. You are living in a city under attack from within. You watch as the daily rhythms of life are warped and distorted by the smell. On the streets, social norms are replaced by a shared, desperate instinct for survival. Strangers united in their misery exchange weary glances over the tops of their handkerchiefs. The handkerchief, once a simple accessory, becomes an essential piece of personal protective equipment. You see people from all walks of life, clerks, shopgirls, gentlemen, laborers, all clutching something to their face. Those who can't afford scented cologne make do with cloth, dipped in vinegar, or even just plain water. Commerce begins to suffer. The shops that line the main thoroughfares, especially those anywhere near the river, see their business evaporate. Who wants to go shopping for fine hats or books when the air itself makes you want to retch? The riverside pubs and inns, normally bustling with sailors and locals, are eerily quiet. Their patrons have been driven away by a smell that can overpower even the allure of cheap gin. The grand pleasure gardens, popular spots for evening strolls and entertainment, are deserted. There is no pleasure to be had in breathing this air. The city's residents become amateur scientists. Tracking the movement of the stink as if it were a weather front, they notice its worst at high tide, when the incoming seawater pushes the concentrated sewage back upriver, preventing it from escaping to the sea. They learn which way the wind is blowing and plan their errands accordingly. The wind is from the southwest today. Best avoid the strand becomes a common piece of household wisdom. People become prisoners in their own homes, attempting to seal their windows and doors against the invisible intruder. A futile effort that only turns their living spaces into stuffy, suffocating hot boxes. This period saw a boom in all sorts of quasi-scientific products promising relief. Advertisements pop up in newspapers for anti-miasmatic oils, cholera-preventing amulets, and various forms of personal ventilators, which were often little more than small sponges in a metal case. It was a golden age for charlatans and quacks, preying on the public's fear and desperation. One of the more peculiar health fads to gain traction was the promotion of tobacco smoking as a preventative measure. The logic, such as it was, held that the smoke from a pipe or cigar would create a protective barrier of good smoke around the individual, warding off the dangerous miasma. The psychological toll of the crisis is immense. The constant, inescapable foulness frays nerves and fuels a deep-seated anxiety. The miasma theory, which links the smell directly to deadly disease, means that every long FUL of putrid air feels like a gamble with death. Parents keep their children indoors, terrified of what they might breathe in outside. The fear of an impending cholera epidemic is palpable. Every new case of stomach upset in a neighborhood is whispered about, feared to be the first sign of a coming plague. Historians debate whether this collective trauma was necessary for change. Did London have to be brought to its knees before it would finally confront the monumental task of cleaning itself up? It seems so. The crisis created a singular, unified political will that had never existed before. For a few weeks in the summer of 1858, the usual divisions of class and politics were dissolved by a shared sense of utter desperation. Rich and poor, Tory and Whig, were all united in their suffering and in their demand that something must be done. You walk through the streets of this besieged city, and you feel the strange combination of panic and paralysis. The greatest city on earth is helpless, suffocating on its own success. The very systems that allowed it to grow so large, the river for transport, the water for industry, the sewers for waste, have conspired to create an environmental catastrophe. The machine has broken down, and now everyone is waiting, praying for a hero, an engineer, a politician, anyone, to figure out how to fix it. In the midst of the crisis, you find yourself seeking information, trying to make sense of the chaos. You pick up a copy of Punch, the city's leading satirical magazine. It's the Victorian equivalent of a late-night comedy show, known for its witty commentary and, most famously, its powerful political cartoons. Flipping through the pages, you find that The Great Stink is not just a news story. It's a goldmine for the magazine's artists and writers. They capture the city's mood of disgust and anger with a sharpness that official reports could never match. One cartoon, in particular, catches your eye. It will become one of the most famous images of the era. The cartoon is titled The Silent Highway. It depicts a skeletal figure of death, cloaked and grim, rowing a boat on a dark, filthy river. His passenger is a terrified, spectral figure of a woman representing the city of London, her children clinging to her. The highway is demanding her life, or her money, for the cost of fixing the problem. This powerful image perfectly encapsulates the public's feeling. The Thames is no longer a benign river. It has become a malevolent force, a thief that threatens to rob them of their very lives. Another cartoon from the same period, titled Father Thames Introducing His Offspring to the Fair City of London, is even more direct and grotesque. It shows a filthy, bearded, troll-like figure of Father Thames presenting three sickly, deformed children labeled diphtheria, SC or rubella, and cholera, to a horrified Britannia figure. The message is brutally clear. The river is the source, the parent, of the diseases that plague the city. These cartoons aren't subtle. They are a visceral expression of public fury, pointing the finger of blame directly at the polluted river and the authorities who have allowed it to become so foul. These images are incredibly effective because they give a face to an invisible enemy. It's hard to rally against a smell or a vague theory of miasma, but a skeletal death on the water, a monstrous Father Thames, these are villains you can understand, villains you can get angry at. The cartoons galvanize public opinion, transforming a general sense of unease into a focused demand for action. They are shared, talked about, and posted in shop windows. They become the symbols of the crisis. This leads you to a curious aspect of Victorian media, the rise of the illustrated press. Magazines like Punch and the Illustrated London News were relatively new phenomena. For the first time, mass audiences could see current events depicted in vivid, timely engravings. This visual culture had a profound impact on politics. A single, powerful cartoon could shape public debate more effectively than 1,000 columns of dense text. It was a new form of political pressure, and in the summer of 1858, it was aimed squarely at the do-nothing politicians. As you look at these cartoons, you also notice the personification of the river itself. Father Thames is a recurring character, but his portrayal changes dramatically over time. In earlier, more romantic depictions, he was a wise, benevolent river god, a symbol of London's strength and prosperity. Now, in 1858, he has become a monster, a dirty, malevolent creature, a source of shame rather than pride. This transformation in the public imagination is a direct reflection of the river's physical decay. Historians who study media and culture still analyze the role these cartoons played in resolving the crisis. Was the press a genuine agent of change, or was it simply reflecting a public mood that was already shifting? The consensus is that it was a powerful feedback loop. The cartoons articulated the public's anger, which in turn put more pressure on the politicians, who were shamed and satirized weekly in the pages of a magazine read by everyone who mattered. Disraeli and his government weren't just dealing with a smell. They were dealing with a full-blown PR disaster. Expertly rendered in black and white, you fold the magazine, but the images are burned into your mind. The skeletal boatman, the monstrous father. The city has found its narrative for the crisis. The enemy has been identified and caricatured. The feeling on the street is no longer just fear. It's anger. The people of London have been pushed too far. And now, thanks to a few talented artists with sharp pens and a wicked sense of humor, they are demanding that the silent highwine be brought to justice. The call for a hero, a solution, is growing louder every day. Driven by a morbid curiosity to see the full spectrum of London's relationship with its tormented river, you venture down to the shoreline itself. You head to a place where the riverbank isn't a neat stone embankment, but a wide, sloping beach of dark, foul-smelling mud. This is the domain of a group of people who live at the absolute bottom of the city's economic ladder. They are the mudlarkes. The term originally referred to street urchins who scavenged in the river mud at low tide. But by this time it describes people of all ages, driven by extreme poverty to this desperate form of subsistence. As the tide recedes, it reveals a slick, glistening expanse of black, sticky mud, littered with the detritus of the city. This isn't just mud, it's a condensed, semi-solid archive of London's waste. And here, figures in tattered clothes, their trousers rolled up to their knees, their feet bare, begin to pick their way across the hazardous terrain. They walk with a practiced, shuffling gait, their eyes scanning the ground with intense focus. They are searching for anything, absolutely anything, of value. You watch them work. They are looking for dropped coins, bits of scrap metal like copper nails from ship hulls, fragments of old iron, or discarded lumps of coal that have fallen from barges. These items, seemingly worthless, can be gathered and sold to junk dealers for a few precious pennies, enough to buy a loaf of bread or a bed for the night in a squalid lodging house. It's a back-breaking, disgusting, and incredibly dangerous way to make a living. The mud itself is a treacherous enemy. It's thickened, has a glue-like consistency that can pull a person down. Beneath the surface lie hidden dangers, sharp pieces of broken glass, rusty metal shards, and deep, soft pockets that can trap a leg. And of course, the mud is saturated with the raw sewage and chemical waste of the river. Every cut or scrape, no matter how small, is a potential gateway for infection and disease. The mudlarks work in the very substance that is poisoning the city, their hands and feet constantly immersed in the toxic sludge. You learn about the subtle hierarchies and territories of the riverbank. Certain stretches of mud are considered more profitable than others, particularly those near docks where cargo is loaded or near the outlets of sewers, which sometimes spit out things lost down drains. These prime spots are jealously guarded. The mudlarks are a community of their own, with their own rules and codes, bound together by a shared, desperate struggle. A particularly grim and peculiar find for a mudlark was sea coal. This wasn't coal from the sea, but small lumps of coal that had been dropped into the river from the barges that supplied the city. It was a primary source of fuel for these impoverished scavengers. They would gather it, wash it as best they could in the filthy river water, and then either use it to warm their own meagre homes or sell it to others who couldn't afford clean coal. The irony is staggering. They are harvesting fuel from the very river that the city's coal burning has helped to pollute. Historians and sociologists are fascinated by the mudlarks. They represent the most extreme form of urban foraging, a symptom of a society with immense wealth, but also deep pockets of desperate poverty. There's a debate about how we should view them. Are they tragic victims of an uncaring industrial system, or are they resourceful survivors, demonstrating incredible resilience and enterprise in the face of impossible circumstances? In truth, they are both. Their existence is a stark reminder of the brutal reality that lay just beneath the surface of Victorian prosperity. You watch an old woman, her back bent, her face etched with hardship, triumphantly hold up a small, dark object she has pulled from the ooze. It looks like a rusty nail. Her prize seems so small, so pathetic, yet her expression is one of genuine relief. It is a tiny victory in a long, losing battle. Standing there, with the great stink filling your lungs, you realize that for you, this is a horrifying spectacle. For the mudlarks, this is just another Tuesday. The river that is a source of disgust and fear for the rest of London is, for them, a source of survival. It is their provider, a cruel, dangerous, and filthy provider, but a provider nonetheless. Your journey into London's hidden underworld continues, taking you from the exposed mudflats of the Thames to its dark, secret veins, the sewers. You hear tales of an even more mysterious and daring group of scavengers than the mudlarks. They are known as the shearers. While the mudlarks work in the open air at low tide, the two shearers work in the pitch black, suffocating confines of the city sewer system itself. They are the elite of the scavenging world, and their work is shrouded in legend and rumor. To be a tusher, you need a specific set of tools and a specific kind of courage. You see a figure who fits the description, preparing for his descent near a sewer grating in a back alley. He wears a heavy, greasy canvas coat and thick, high boots. Over his shoulder is a long pole, bent in his hand. A lantern. The most distinctive part of his uniform is a small sieve, or riddle, attached to the end of his pole. This is for sifting through the grime. He pries open the grate, and with a last look at the sky, disappears into the darkness below. You can only imagine the world he has just entered. A labyrinth of brick tunnels, some vast enough to stand in, others so small they require crawling. The air is thick with poisonous gases, methane, ammonia, hydrogen sulfide, the same gases you smell bubbling up from the river. But here, in this enclosed space, they are concentrated and deadly. The two shearers learn to test the air with their lanterns. If the flame burns low or changes color, it's a sign of bad air, a signal to retreat immediately. They wade, sometimes waist deep, to a slow-moving river of filth, the combined waste of the city. Their lanterns cast long, dancing shadows on the curved, slime-coated brickwork. Their world is one of utter darkness, punctuated by the scurrying of rats. And these aren't ordinary rats. The sewer rats of London are legendary. Large, bold, and fiercely territorial. Every toucher has stories of close encounters, of fending off packs of rats with their poles. Some tales, likely exaggerated, speak of rats the size of cats. What are they looking for in this subterranean hell? Muddy, the two CRS are hunting for coins, silverware, jewelry, anything of value that has been accidentally washed down the city's drains. A dropped shilling rolling into a gutter, a ring slipping off a finger while washing dishes. It all ends up here. The two CRS are the bottom feeders of the urban economy, recovering the small, lost fragments of London's wealth. Their biggest prizes are the scraps of copper and other metals they can pry from the sewer walls or find in the sludge. One of the most bizarre aspects of the two CRS trade was their relationship with publicans. Certain pubs located near major sewer outlets became known as two CRS pubs. Here, they could emerge from their walk, clean themselves as best they could, and sell their findings. The publican would act as a middleman, buying their scrap metal and coins. It was a strange, symbiotic relationship between the city's surface world and its hidden underbelly. The very existence of the two CRS is a point of some historical debate, while they were vividly described by the journalist Henry Mayhew in his famous work, London Labour and the London Poor. Some modern historians question how widespread the practice really was. Was it a genuine, albeit small, profession, or was it more of a romanticized, semi-mythical archetype of the urban poor? The evidence is sparse, relying heavily on anecdotal accounts. It's likely the truth lies somewhere in between. A small, secretive group of individuals whose daring unsqualid work captured the public's imagination. The greatest fear for to show wasn't the rats or the gas. It was the flush. A sudden, heavy rainstorm could turn the slow-moving sewer stream into a raging torrent in minutes, sweeping away anyone caught inside. Similarly, the opening of sluice gates further up the system could release a tidal wave of water and filth with no warning. It was a profession where a wrong turn or a moment's inattention could lead to a swift and lonely death. Your body washed out into the Thames, just another piece of debris in the toxic water. As you stand by the sewer grate, the faint, foul smell wafting up from below, you feel a new level of respect and horror for the unseen world beneath your feet. The city above is in a panic about the stink, but down there, in the darkness, there are people who willingly immerse themselves in its source. They are the ultimate embodiment of survival in this brutal, ingenious, and filthy city. The crisis has reached a fever pitch. The stink is unbearable. Parliament is paralyzed, and the public is terrified. In the committee rooms and newspaper columns, the great debate that has been simmering for years now boils over. What is the true nature of the enemy? Is it the miasma, the foul air that everyone can smell and feel? Or is it the contagion, some invisible poison lurking in the water? As the eccentric drive, Snow and his few followers insist, the fate of London hangs on the answer to this question, because the solution to each problem is radically different. You find yourself in an imaginary ringside seat for this epic scientific showdown. In one corner, you have the miasmatists. They are the heavyweight champions, the medical establishment. Their ranks are filled with the most respected physicians and public health officials of the day. Their argument is simple, intuitive, and seems to be confirmed by all the senses. Bad smells emanate from places of filth and decay. Disease is most rampant in these same places. Therefore, the smell itself, the miasma, must be the vehicle of transmission. To them, the great stink is the ultimate proof of their theory. The air has become a city-wide poison, and the only solution is to purify it. They advocate for massive, city-wide disinfection campaigns, washing the streets with lime, burning tar barrels, and, most importantly, flushing the sewers with large volumes of water to wash the filth. In the smell, the way. In the other corner are the contagionists. They are the underdogs, a small but tenacious group of dissenters. Their champion is the methodical Jon Snow, though he is not alone. They argue that diseases like cholera are caused by a specific, self-replicating morbid matter or poison that is transmitted from person to person, often through contaminated water or food. They point to Snow's Broad Street pump map as their key evidence. Their theory is less intuitive. It requires believing in a danger you cannot see or smell. They argue that flushing the sewers is the worst possible thing to do, as it will only wash more of the concentrated cholera poison from the city's cesspools directly into the Thames, the source of much of the city's drinking water. Their solution is completely different. Find a source of pure water and stop people from drinking the contaminated supply. The debate is fierce and oft unpersonal. The miasmatists, led by powerful figures like Dr. William Farr at the General Register Office, control the official narrative. They have the data on their side, or so they think. Farr's own research showed a correlation between low-lying areas near the river and higher death rates from cholera. He interpreted this as proof that the heavier, more dangerous miasma settled in these low areas. He couldn't see that he was actually proving the waterborne theory, as these same low-lying areas were the ones being supplied by the most polluted water companies. A fascinating and somewhat tragic detail of this debate involves the German scientist Max von Pettenkofer. He was a prominent miasmatist who was so convinced that the cholera germ by then discovered was harmless on its own, and only became dangerous when it mixed with certain soil and air conditions, that he conducted a shocking experiment. He famously drank a beaker full of water teeming with cholera bacteria to prove his point. He suffered only mild symptoms, a fact that is still debated by scientists today. He may have had some natural immunity, or the sample may have been weak, but his stunt was seen by many as a blow against the simplistic germ theory. This whole scientific clash is a source of endless fascination for historians of science. They debate why the miasma theory held on for so long. Was it simply institutional inertia? Was it the lack of a fully formed germ theory to provide a compelling alternative? Or was it a more subtle social bias? The miasma theory conveniently blamed the poor for their own illnesses by focusing on their foul-smelling living conditions. The waterborne theory, on the other hand, pointed the finger at the wealthy, powerful water companies and the negligent government that failed to regulate them. It was a much more politically disruptive idea. As a neutral observer, you can see the tragic irony. Both sides are partially right. The miasmatists are right that the filth and smell are a massive problem that needs to be addressed. The contagionists are right about the specific transmission mechanism for cholera. But in the summer of 1858, in the heat and the panic, there is no room for nuance. The city must choose a path. The miasmatists, with their common sense, smell-based argument, have the upper hand. The initial, desperate response to the great stink will be guided by their philosophy. To fight the smell, they must wash the filth into the river. It's a decision that, as Jon Snow would have predicted, could have catastrophic consequences. Out of the chaos and the stench, a hero emerges, but HES, not a dashing politician or a crusading doctor. HES, a civil engineer, a man of quiet competence and immense determination named Joseph Basilevich. At the time of the Great Stink, he is the chief engineer for the Metropolitan Board of Works, a new city-wide governing body that had been created, in part, to solve London's sanitation crisis. For years, he has been toiling in relative obscurity, drawing up plans and fighting for funding. Now, suddenly, his moment has arrived. You can picture him, a man of medium height, with a magnificent mustache and a gaze that suggests he is more comfortable with blueprints and calculations than with public speaking. Basilevich is not a flashy innovator. He is a pragmatist, a master of detail and scale. He has spent years studying London's complex geography, its tidal patterns, and its sprawling, chaotic network of existing sewers. He understands the problem not as a matter of medicine or smell, but as a massive, city-wide plumbing issue. The problem, as Basilevich sees it, is one of basic design. London's existing sewers, built over centuries or a haphazard mess. They mostly follow the natural lie of the land, draining downhill directly into the Thames. This works, sort of, for rainwater. But for the constant flow of sewage from a metropolis of millions, it's a disaster. The outlets are too low, many of them below the high tide mark. This means that for several hours a day, the incoming tide from the sea actually pushes the sewage back up the sewers, where it stagnates and releases its foul gases into the streets. Then, as the tide recedes, this concentrated filth oozes out into the river. But it doesn't get washed away to sea. The tidal nature of the Thames means it just sloshes back and forth in the center of London with each tide. A disgusting, oscillating soup of waste. Basil Ettedge's plan, which he has been refining for years, is revolutionary in its simplicity and breathtaking in its ambition. He proposes to completely ignore the existing, flawed system of drainage. Instead, he will build a whole new, secondary sewer network. This new network will not drain into the Thames. It will run alongside it. He calls them interceptor sewers. The idea is to build huge, gently sloping sewer tunnels running from west to east, across the natural drainage lines of the city. These main interceptors, built just below the existing sewer outlets, will catch all the sewage before it can reach the river. They will then carry it, using the gentle, precisely calculated force of gravity, far to the east, miles downstream from the city. Once there, at massive outfalls in places like Beckton into Crossness, the sewage can be held in giant reservoirs and released into the river on the outgoing tide, to be carried safely out to sea, far away from London's drinking water intakes. This plan also solved the problem of the low-lying areas south of the river. For these districts, where gravity flow isn't possible, Basil Ettedge planned to build enormous, ornate pumping stations to lift the sewage up into the main outfall sewers. It is a comprehensive, elegant solution to a problem that had seemed impossibly complex, a quirky detail that showcases Basil Ettedge's meticulous planning was his choice of materials and dimensions. He insisted on using the highest quality Portland cement, a relatively new material that was stronger and more durable than traditional mortar. And for the size of the tunnels, he famously took the most generous population density estimate he could find, calculated the sewer diameter needed for that population, and then declared, "Well, we're only going to do this once and there's always the unforeseen." He then doubled the diameter of all his planned pipes. This foresight was legendary. He was building a sewer system not just for his London, but for the London of 100 years in the future. That single decision is arguably why his system is still functioning, serving London to this day. Historians who study great engineering projects often debate the source of Basil Ettedge's genius. Was it pure technical brilliance, or was it his incredible political skill and persistence? He spent years battling bureaucrats, politicians, and rival engineers, all of whom had their own pet theories and schemes. He endured ridicule and endless revisions to his plans, but he never wavered. He knew his plan was the only one that would work on the scale required. In the feverish atmosphere of the Great Stink, Parliament is finally ready to listen. The politicians, choking on the stench from the river just outside their windows, are desperate for a solution. Any solution. Benjamin Disraeli, the man who had decried the Stygian pool, pushes an emergency bill through Parliament in a record-breaking 18 days. It gives Basil Ettedge the authority and, crucially, the money, an unprecedented £3 million, to make his plan a reality. The hero, armed with his blueprints and his double-sized pipes, has been given his quest. The city holds its breath. The great cleanup is about to begin. With the legislation passed and the funds secured, Basil Ettedge wastes no time. The city is about to witness the unveiling of an engineering plan on a scale it has never seen before. You can imagine him unrolling his vast, detailed blueprints in a dusty office of the Metropolitan Board of Works. To the untrained eye, it's a bewildering web of lines, gradients, and technical notes. But to those who understand, it's a work of genius. a master plan to save a city. The core of the plan consists of 3 massive main interceptor sewers running along the north side of the Thames, and 2 on the south side. These aren't just pipes, they are subterranean rivers. Brick-lined tunnels so large you could drive a bus through some of them. On the north side, there's a high-level sewer, starting from the leafy hills of Hampstead, a mid-level sewer running from near Hyde Park, and a low-level sewer that will run right along the river's edge. Each one is positioned to intercept the flow from the old, perpendicular sewers at a different elevation. The beauty of the design is its reliance on gravity. Basil Lettich and his team have meticulously surveyed the entire city, creating a detailed topographical map. They calculate the precise gradient needed for the interceptors, a fall of just 2 feet per mile. This gradient is a delicate balancing act. It has to be steep enough to keep the sewage flowing at a steady pace of about 1.5 miles per hour, which is fast enough to prevent solids from settling and creating blockages, but slow enough to not cause erosion of the brickwork. It's an elegant, self-cleaning design that requires no external power for most of its length. The plan is not just about the 5 main arteries. It's a complete circulatory system. These main interceptors will be fed by 82 miles of new main sewers, which in turn will connect to over 100 miles of local street sewers. It's a vast, underground web designed to catch every drop of waste from every street, every house, every new-fangled flush toilet in a city of over 100 square miles. The sheer scale is hard to comprehend. It will require excavating 5 million cubic yards of earth, an amount that would fill a modern football stadium several times over. One of the most ambitious and visible parts of the plan is the creation of the Great Thames embankments. To build the low-level sewer on the north bank, Basil Lettich proposes to build a new river wall out in the Thames itself, reclaiming acres of the foul-smelling mudflats. This will house the giant sewer pipe, but it will also create a wide, new boulevard on top. The Victoria Embankment, as it will be known, will not only hide the sewer, but will also become a grand public space, a beautiful tree-lined road and promenade that will forever change the face of central London. It's a brilliant piece of integrated design, solving an engineering problem while simultaneously creating a massive public amenity. HES not just burying a pipe. HES giving London a new, clean riverfront, a fascinating and little-known challenge that Basil Lettich's team faced was naming the new sewers. In an age of ground, poetic names, they opted for a system of pure, logical utility. The sewers were given prosaic, descriptive names like the EFF-RA branch of the high-level sewer, or the northern low-level sewer now. Zoo. It's a small detail, but it reflects the engineering mindset behind the whole project. Function over form, clarity over romance. Historians often compare Basil Lettich's sewer network to other great engineering feats of the age, like the railways or the great ironclad ships. But there's a key difference. The sewers were largely invisible. They were a hidden masterpiece. This raises an interesting question. How do you build public support and pride for a project that, if it works correctly, no one will ever see? The embankments were a partial answer, a beautiful public face for a dirty job. But the true success of the project would be measured by what was absent. The stink, the filth, the disease. As the plans are finalized and the contracts are awarded, a new kind of army begins to assemble in London. Not soldiers, but navvies, the tough, hard-living labourers who built the canals and railways. They are the ones who will descend into the earth with pickaxes and shovels to make Basil Lettich's lines on a map a reality. The city, so recently paralyzed by filth, is now thrumming with the energy of a new, massive undertaking. The war against the Great Stink is about to move from the committee rooms to the trenches. The work begins. London transforms into a vast, chaotic construction site. The city that was recently silenced by the stink is now filled with a new kind of noise. The rhythmic clang of pickaxes on stone, the shouts of foremen, the rumble of wagons carrying away mountains of excavated earth, and the screech of steam-powered machinery. It is the sound of a city performing open-heart surgery on itself. You wander through the streets, and everywhere you see the signs of Baselitige's grand project. Great trenches are being dug, slicing through roads and disappearing around corners. These are not neat, tidy excavations. They are huge, timber-shored canyons cutting through the heart of the city, disrupting traffic and daily life. To lay the sewers, the navvies have to navigate a treacherous, hidden landscape. They cut through layers of history, Roman foundations, medieval plague pits, the tangled mess of existing water pipes, gas lines, and the crumbling brickwork of older, forgotten sewers. Every foot of progress is a battle against the unknown. The workforce is an army of thousands of navvies. These men are the unsung heroes of the project. The work is incredibly dangerous and physically punishing. They toil deep underground in dark, damp, and often hazardous conditions. Cave-ins are a constant threat. Pockets of explosive methane gas, the same danger faced by the 2S, can be released without warning. They encounter underground springs and rivers that can flood their tunnels in minutes. The work is relentless, carried out with brute force and a surprising amount of skill. You watch a team of bricklayers working deep in a newly excavated tunnel, their faces lit by the flickering orange glow of oil lamps. They are the artists of this subterranean world. They work with incredible speed and precision, laying an estimated 308 million bricks in total to line the tunnels. The quality of their work is paramount. The sewers have to be strong enough to withstand the immense pressure of the earth above them and perfectly sealed to prevent leaks. They use a special mortar mixed with high-quality Portland cement, a mixture so strong that even today, the brickwork is in astonishingly good condition. One of the cleverest, yet simplest, innovations Baselittage employed was the use of ovoid, or egg-shaped, pipes for the smaller street sewers. This was a stroke of genius. A circular pipe works well when it's full, but with the variable flow of a local sewer, the wide, circular bottom can cause the water to spread out and slow down, allowing sediment to settle. The egg-shaped design, with a narrower end at the bottom, concentrates the low flow of water into a smaller channel. This keeps the water moving faster, creating a self-scouring effect that helps to keep the sewer clean and free of blockages. It's a small, elegant piece of design that saved the city countless hours and expense in maintenance. The project is not without its controversies and challenges. Business owners complain loudly about the disruption caused by the endless trench digging. Homeowners are terrified that the deep excavations will undermine the foundations of their houses. At one point, the digging of the mid-level sewer runs perilously close to London's nascent underground railway system, the Metropolitan Line, which is being built at the same time. It's a moment of high drama for the engineers, as two of the 19th century, this greatest infrastructure projects threaten to collide beneath the city streets. They managed to navigate the challenge, with the sewer passing just a few feet over the top of the railway tunnel. Historians who study labor history are particularly interested in the navvies. Who were these men? They were mostly migrant workers, many from Ireland, who followed large construction projects around the country. They were known for their immense physical strength, their prodigious appetites for food and drink, and for living in temporary, rough and ready camps. They were a tribe apart, essential to the creation of modern Britain, yet often viewed with suspicion by the settled communities they worked in. Their sweat and their oft unshortened lives are literally baked into the bricks of the city's foundations. As you walk the chaotic streets of London, you can feel the city's pain and its hope. It's a mess. It's noisy. It's inconvenient. But for the first time in a long time, the smell from the river seems a little less potent, a little less menacing. The work is far from over, but the tide, both literally and figuratively, is beginning to turn. The epic of bricks and willpower is slowly, painstakingly reshaping the city from the inside out. You delve deeper into the genius of Baselittage's design, and you begin to appreciate the sheer cleverness of the interceptor system. It's not just about digging big tunnels, it's about making them work together in a perfectly orchestrated, gravity-powered dance. The key to the whole northern system, which serves the majority of London, is the way the three main sewers, the high, middle, and low level work in concert. Imagine you're standing on Hampstead Heath, one of the highest points in London. This is where the high-level interceptor begins its long, gentle journey eastward. It flows entirely by gravity, cruising above the city, collecting the waste from the northern suburbs. Further south, the mid-level interceptor does the same for the central part of the city. But the real challenge, the engineering masterpiece, is the low-level interceptor. This is the one that has to run through the most congested, low-lying parts of the city, right alongside the Thames. To build it, they are literally creating new land. The construction of the Victoria Embankment is a monumental undertaking. You watch as thousands of wooden piles are driven deep into the riverbed. A massive cofferdam is built to hold back the river, and behind this temporary wall, the navvies work in the exposed, foul-smelling mud. They lay the enormous, 8-foot diameter bricked tunnel of the low-level sewer. Alongside it, they build a smaller tunnel for a new underground railway line, the District Line, and a series of service conduits for gas and water pipes. It's an incredibly efficient use of space, a 19th century vision of integrated infrastructure. Once the tunnels are complete, they are covered over, and a thick granite retaining wall is built to form the new river's edge. The land behind it is filled in, and just like that, 37 acres of the Thames mudflats disappear forever, replaced by what will become one of London's grandest boulevards. It's a breathtaking transformation. The very source of the stink, the exposed, sewage-soaked mud, is being buried and paved over. The interceptor design also includes a crucial safety feature: storm overflows. Basil knows that his system, as vast as it is, cannot cope with the sheer volume of water from a major thunderstorm. If it tried, the pressure would build up and the sewers would erupt into the streets. So, at strategic points where the old sewers meet the new interceptors, he builds overflow weirs. Under normal conditions, the sewage flows over low wall and drops into the interceptor tunnel below. But during a heavy storm, when the volume increases dramatically, the water level rises and a portion of the heavily diluted stormwater flows over a higher weir directly into the Thames. It's a pragmatic compromise. It means that on rare occasions, some diluted sewage still enters the river, but it prevents the entire system from failing and the city from flooding. A quirky but brilliant detail of the sewer construction was the Great Stink itself. While the project was born from the crisis, the memory of the stink also helped to overcome public opposition. Whenever homeowners or businesses complained about the disruption, the authorities had the ultimate trump card. Would you rather we stop and go back to how it was in Wushaba? It was a powerful and effective argument that silenced most complaints. Historians still debate the full, long-term consequences of Basil's design. By collecting all the sewage and dumping it further downstream, did he simply move the pollution problem from central London to the communities in the east? In the short term, yes. The ecosystem around the new outfalls at Beckton and Cross Ness was devastated. It wasn't until the 20th century that sewage treatment plants were built to clean the effluent before it was released. However, this criticism misses the point of what Basil was trying to achieve. His brief was not to purify the sewage, but to save London from the immediate crisis of disease and stench by removing the waste from the city centre. In that, he succeeded beyond all expectation. You stand on the newly completed Victoria Embankment. The road is wide and smooth. Young trees have been planted. Gas lamps are installed. Below your feet, hidden from sight, the low-level sewer is silently carrying its toxic cargo away from the city. You look out at the river. It's still a murky, industrial waterway, but something has changed. The thick, bubbling foulness is gone. The overwhelming stench has been replaced by the more mundane smells of a working river. The interceptor system is working. Basil is clever. Gravity-powered solution has fundamentally re-engineered the relationship between London and its river. While most of Basil's masterpiece is hidden underground, there are parts of it that are designed to be seen, and they are glorious. To handle the sewage from the low-lying areas, particularly south of the river, gravity alone is not enough. The waste has to be physically lifted up to the level of the main outfall sewers. For this, Basel designed and built for massive pumping stations, but these are not drab, functional, utilitarian buildings. They are cathedrals of steam power, magnificent showcases of Victorian industrial art. You travel to Crossness, on the south bank of the Thames, miles east of the city centre. This is the location of the southern outfall, where the sewage is collected before being released into the river. And here stands the Crossness pumping station. From the outside, it's an impressive, ornate Romanesque style brick building with a tall, elegant chimney that looks more like an Italian campanile than a factory smokestack. But it's the inside that truly takes your breath away. You step into the main engine house, and it feels like you've walked into a Jules Verne fantasy. The room is vast, airy, and filled with light. The ironwork is not merely functional. It is incredibly elaborate, painted in rich greens, reds, and golds. The columns have delicate floral capitals. The staircases are intricate spirals, and the railings are works of decorative art. It is a symphony of cast iron, a style that has been nicknamed cathedral-like industrial. Basil and his team have taken the most profane of tasks, pumping sewage, and housed it in a palace. At the heart of this iron cathedral are four colossal steam engines. They are giants of brass and iron, lovingly polished and maintained by their crews. These are beam engines, the design that dates back to the early Industrial Revolution, but has been scaled up to a monstrous size. Each engine is named after a member of the royal family: Victoria, Prince Consort, Albert Edward, and Alexandra. You watch as one of them operates, with a rhythmic, almost silent hiss of steam. A massive iron beam, weighing over 50 tons, rises and falls in a slow, graceful, and immensely powerful motion. This beam drives a huge plunger, which in turn lifts thousands of gallons of sewage with each stroke. The combined power of these four engines can lift over 240 million gallons of waste per day. It's an awesome display of raw, controlled power. A fascinating detail about these pumping stations is that they became unlikely tourist attractions. In an age that celebrated engineering and progress, people would come out from the city to marvel at these magnificent machines. They would walk along the polished brass railings, admire the decorative ironwork, and gaze in wonder at the giant, silent engines performing their Herculean task. It was a way for the public to connect with the great unseen sewer project, to see the power and the beauty that was working to keep their city clean. This celebration of industrial aesthetics is a subject that architectural historians love to discuss. Why did the Victorians feel the need to make a sewage pumping station so beautiful? Was it simple civic pride? Was it a desire to legitimize a new, and still somewhat controversial, public utility by clothing it in the grand architectural styles of the past? Or was it a deeper belief that good engineering was inherently beautiful, and that even the most mundane industrial building deserved to be treated with artistic respect? The answer is likely a combination of all three. These buildings were monuments to the new age of steam and sanitation, testaments to a belief that technology and art could work together to conquer the forces of nature and disease. Similar, though slightly less grand, pumping stations were built at Abbey Mills in the north, often called the Cathedral of Sewage, as well as at Deptford and Pimlico. Together, they formed the mighty, steam-powered heart of the new sewer system. They were the muscles that lifted the city as waste, allowing Basel gravity-fed arteries to do their work. Standing in the magnificent, echoing hall at Crossness, you feel the immense confidence of the Victorian era. It's a confidence that believed no problem was too big, no challenge too great, for the power of human ingenuity and steam. They didn't just solve the problem of sewage, they did it with style, with artistry, and with a flair for the dramatic. They took the city as filthened, through the alchemy of engineering and architecture, transformed its management into a thing of beauty. The years pass. The immense, disruptive construction project gradually comes to an end. The trenches are filled, the roads are repaved, and the city surface returns to a semblance of normality. The main sections of Basel's system are operational by the mid-1860s. The great question now is, has it worked? Has the epic undertaking of brick, steam, and iron truly defeated the great stinkin' the threat it represented? You return to the banks of the Thames, to the same spots where, just a few years earlier, you witnessed a river of bubbling, stinking filth. The transformation is profound. The first thing you notice is the smell, or rather, the lack of it. The overpowering, gag-inducing stench of 1858 is gone. The air no longer tastes of sewage. Instead, you smell the more normal, brackish scent of a tidal, urban river, a mix of salt, damp earth, and the lingering hint of coal smoke. It's not fresh country air by any means, but the oppressive, pestilential cloud has lifted. The river's appearance has changed dramatically too. The thick, soupy consistency is gone. The water is still murky, colored by the clay of its bed and the general runoff of a busy city. But it is recognizably water again. The iridescent slicks of industrial waste and the floating mats of decomposing matter have largely vanished. You can look down from a bridge and see more than just an inch below the surface. The constant eruption of methane bubbles from the riverbed has ceased. The river is still not clean in the modern sense, but it is no longer an open sewer. The ecological recovery begins almost immediately. Life starts to return to the de-exigmenting water. Within a few years of the new system becoming operational, fishermen report catching species of fish that haven't been seen in central London for decades. You see swans gliding on the water, no longer hesitant to dip their heads beneath the surface. The river is slowly, tentatively, coming back to life. The most dramatic proof of the system's success comes in 1866. Cholera once again rears its ugly head in Europe and makes its way to London. An outbreak occurs, concentrated in the east end of the city. For a moment, it seems the great new sewer system has failed. But then, investigators, now armed with a much wider acceptance of Jon Snow's theories, discover something crucial. The affected area is a part of London that, for various reasons, has not yet been connected to Basildge's new network. Its residents are still being supplied with water from the still polluted lower reaches of the River Lee, a tributary of the Thames. The rest of London, the vast majority of the city, now served by the new sewers and cleaner water intakes, remains almost entirely untouched by the epidemic. It is the final, tragic, but decisive vindication of both Jon Snow's water-borne theory and Joseph Basildge's engineering solution. The link between the sewage-contaminated water and the disease is proven beyond all doubt. A curious little-known fact is that the foul mudflats, which were eliminated by the construction of the embankments, had been a source of income for some. Scavengers would collect the dark, fertile mud and sell it as fertilizer. With the building of the embankments, this strange, marginal trade disappeared overnight. Another small, forgotten way of life, erased by progress. The new system is hailed as a triumph. Joseph Basildge, once a persistent but obscure engineer, becomes a national hero. He is lauded in the press and celebrated by the public. He is eventually knighted for his services to the city. His name becomes synonymous with the salvation of London. Historians still reflect on the legacy of this moment. The Great Stink and its solution marked a turning point in the history of public health and urban planning. It was a brutal, citywide lesson in the consequences of unchecked growth and inadequate infrastructure. It demonstrated that the health of a city's population was directly linked to the quality of its sanitation. This idea, which seems obvious to us today, was revolutionary at the time. The success of the London sewer system inspired cities all over the world to undertake similar massive public works projects. You lean against the cold granite of the Victoria Embankment, watching the steam tugs chugging by on the water. The river is flowing more freely. The air is breathable. The city feels safer, healthier. The great, stinking crisis that brought an empire to its knees is over. The river, once a source of death and dread, has been tamed. It is on its way to becoming, once again, just a river. You're standing on the Victoria Embankment. It's a bright, breezy afternoon decades after the Great Stink. The change is not just remarkable, it's total. This very ground you stand on was once a foul, oozing mudflat, a place of filth and desperation for the mudlark. Now, it is the sophisticated heart of a global city. Well-dressed couples stroll along the wide promenade, children chase hoops, and horse-drawn omnibuses and hansom cabs clatter along a smooth, paved roadway. The air is clean, filled only with the sounds of a confident, thriving metropolis. The new London, born from the crisis of the old, is a healthier city. The change is written in the city's mortality statistics. With the new sewer system fully operational, and the water companies finally forced to draw their supply from cleaner sources upstream, the death rate from waterborne diseases plummets. The terrifying, cyclical outbreaks of cholera that once haunted the city become a thing of the past. Typhoid and typhus, once rampant, begin a steady decline. It turns out that Jon Snow and the Contagionists were right all along. The enemy was never in the air. It was in the glass of water. This newfound health allows London to grow even larger, to become the first city in the world to surpass 5 million people, a scale of urban living that would have been catastrophically unsustainable with its old sanitary systems. Along the embankment and in the newly confident city, a new kind of public architecture appears. As a direct result of this new consciousness around sanitation, London begins to build public lavatories. You might see one, an ornate, cast iron structure, painted a respectable dark green, with intricate decorative details and frosted glass. For a penny, a citizen could use a clean, private, and flushing facility. It's a small, practical, and slightly comical legacy of the Great Stink, but a deeply important one. The city that was once defined by its overflowing privies and cesspools is now pioneering the concept of public convenience, another layer of the new, civilized urban life. The success of Baselitige's system is absolute. It is a source of immense civic pride. But standing here, in this triumphant new London, you can't help but ponder a question that historians still debate. Did the very success of the sewer system create a new set of problems by making it possible for millions of people to live together in a relatively healthy, sanitary environment? Did Baselitige's system inadvertently enable the massive, uncontrolled urban sprawl and overcrowding of the late Victorian and Edwardian eras? Did solving the problem of filth allow the city to ignore the growing problems of housing, poverty, and social inequality for another generation? It's a complex question without an easy answer. The sewer system was a brilliant solution to a specific crisis, but it also became a foundation upon which a bigger, more complex city with a whole new range of challenges could be built. You look out at the river one last time. Pleasure steamers now ferry tourists along its length. The Houses of Parliament stand proud and clean, their riverside terrace now a desirable spot for politicians to chat and take in the view. The memory of 1858, of the unbearable stench, the fear, the panic, has faded. It has been buried, quite literally, under tons of granite, earth, and asphalt. The Great Stink has become a half-forgotten legend, a lurid tale to tell about a less civilized time. The city's greatest crisis, its most profound moment of shame, became the catalyst for its rebirth, and the proof of its salvation lies silent and unseen. A vast, invisible network of brick tunnels, still working tirelessly, deep beneath your feet. And so, our journey through the smoke and the stench of old London comes to a gentle close. You can let the images fade now. The grand, soot-stained buildings can dissolve into the quiet darkness of your room. The clatter of iron wheels on cobblestones softens into a distant echo, and the great steam engines in their iron cathedrals, the magnificent hearts of the system, can slowly, full, silent. The story is over. All that is left is the soft hum of the fan in your room, the quiet weight of the blanket around you, and the gentle pull of sleep. You are drifting now, on a current far more peaceful than the Thames, a slow, quiet river leading you into the deep, undiscovered landscapes of your own dreams. There are no more streets to walk, no more histories to uncover. There is only the stillness of the night, and the promise of rest. The end of the article. Good night.